Amani Carter had never considered herself part of the inner circle at South Ridge High. At 17, she had long learned how to move through hallways without drawing too much attention. Her quiet confidence, academic discipline, and understated kindness were often overlooked in a school culture obsessed with popularity and performance. She was used to being seen but not acknowledged, respected in silence but rarely invited into spaces where visibility meant social capital. That Friday afternoon, when she received a message on Instagram from Madison Blake, a glittering star in the school's elite constellation, she hesitated before even opening it. The message was simple. Hey, party at my place tonight for my birthday. Starts at 7. You should come. Smiley face. Amani stared at the screen. She read the words twice, then a third time. There were no typos, no accidental tags. It was directed at her. Madison Blake was the kind of girl who existed in a different orbit. Blonde, charismatic, and constantly surrounded by admirers, she seemed to glide through high school with the ease of someone who had already been promised the world. She and Amani had exchanged words maybe twice, in group projects or classroom banner, but there had never been a meaningful connection, which made the invitation feel both exciting and unsettling. Amani sat on her bed for over an hour, phone still in hand. Her best friend, Zoe, was out of town visiting family, and her parents were working late. She was alone with her thoughts, wondering whether the invitation had been sent to her by mistake. But the words were still there, and something about the message made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was being noticed for the right reasons. By 6 o'clock in the evening, she was standing in front of the mirror. She had chosen a soft, knee-length navy dress. Nothing extravagant, but it complemented her dark skin and brought out the warmth in her eyes. She wore her hair natural, pinned back slightly with a silver clip her grandmother had given her. There was a quiet elegance about her. She didn't want to look like she was trying too hard. She didn't need to. She just wanted to belong. Her father offered to drop her off. On the way there, he gave his usual protective speech about being careful, texting him when she was ready to come home, and not accepting drinks from anyone she didn't know. She nodded, appreciating the routine, concerned even as her stomach twisted in nervous knots. They arrived at Madison's house, a sprawling 2-story home nestled in an upscale neighborhood just 10 minutes from Amani's own. Cars lined the street. Music thumped from inside, muffled by the brick walls. Bright lights flashed through windows. Laughter erupted periodically, spilling into the cool Carolina evening air. It looked like something out of a teen movie. Amani thanked her dad and stepped out of the car, smoothing the sides of her dress. She walked up the steps, heart pounding. She could hear voices behind the door. For a moment, she considered turning around, but then she raised her hand and knocked. The door opened after a few seconds. Madison stood there, her face flushed with the glow of party lights, a plastic cup in one hand. Her smile faltered the moment she saw who was standing in front of her. Her eyes flickered, confused, then calculating, then cool. "Hi, Madison," Amani said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Thanks for the invite." Madison blinked, then gave a tight smile. Behind her, someone laughed loudly. The bass line from a song pulsed through the air. "Yeah, hey, Amani," she said, the casual tone falling flat. I didn't think you'd actually come." Amani's smile faded, unsure how to interpret the comment. Before she could reply, Madison leaned against the doorframe and glanced back into the house. "So, the thing is," she said, eyes avoiding Amani's, "this is kind of a small thing. Just close friends, you know? I should have been clearer. I'm really sorry." The apology was mechanical, as though rehearsed or forced. Amani felt a weight settle in her chest. "Oh," she managed to say. Madison nodded quickly. "Yeah, hope you have a good night, though." And then the door closed. Not slammed, just slowly, deliberately shut. Amani stood there, alone on the porch, blinking at the wooden door as if waiting for it to reopen. It did not. Behind it, music resumed, louder now. Laughter again. Her presence had already been erased. She walked down the steps slowly, unsure where to go. Her phone buzzed in her purse. Probably her dad checking in, but she could not bring herself to answer. She began walking, not calling him, not crying, just let her feet carry her forward. By the time she reached the end of the block, the air felt colder. She turned the corner and called her father, asking him to come pick her up. She did not tell him what had happened. She simply said the party was not her scene. At home, she went straight to her room. Her parents asked no questions, accustomed to their daughter's independence, her quiet moods. She changed into pajamas, wiped off her makeup, and sat on her bed in the dark, scrolling through her phone. Already, photos from the party were being posted. Selfies in the backyard, group shots with red cups raised high. Madison smiling next to people Amani recognized only vaguely from school. They looked like they were having the time of their lives. Amani stared at one photo in particular, Madison in the center, arm draped around a boy from the soccer team. She zoomed in instinctively, as if the pixels might hold some hidden explanation for what had just happened. But there was none. No cruel captions. No name-calling. Just silence. And somehow that hurt even more. She turned off her phone, pulled the blanket over her head, and closed her eyes. But sleep did not come easily. Not that night. Amani lay awake long after the rest of the house had gone quiet. The stillness of her room seemed heavier than usual, thick with the weight of unspoken emotions she could not yet name. Though she had buried herself beneath her blanket in search of sleep, her mind refused to yield. Her thoughts circled endlessly around the same hollow feeling that had settled in her chest since the door closed in her face. The room was dim, lit only by the soft blue glow of her phone screen, but even that eventually became unbearable. She turned it face down on her nightstand and stared at the ceiling, as if expecting it to answer the questions she could not ask out loud. She had not told Zoe, not even a quick message. It was not shame exactly, but something adjacent to it, an unwillingness to put words to a moment that already felt impossible to explain. Maybe it would sound petty if she described the scene plainly. Or maybe it would sound too familiar, a replay of the many subtle ways she had been told before that she did not belong, that her presence was a disruption, even when invited. The night pressed on, and the sound of the outside world grew distant. Occasionally, a car would pass on the street, its headlights sweeping across her window before vanishing. Crickets chirped faintly beyond the glass. Her neighborhood was quiet, rows of modest, well-kept homes with trimmed lawns and driveways that told stories of quiet, working families. Inside her own home, there was peace. But inside Amani, there was only noise. Just past midnight, she finally sat up in bed. Her heart was restless. She reached for her phone, not to check messages, but to distract herself. Anything to keep from sitting with the ache that had been growing in her chest since earlier that evening. She opened Instagram again, despite herself, and swiped through the endless carousel of smiling faces at Madison's house. The party was still going strong, it seemed. There was even a video of someone jumping into the pool fully clothed, the crowd erupting in laughter. The lights were bright. The music was loud. Everyone looked carefree, and yet none of it felt real to her anymore. She closed the app and tossed the phone aside. Downstairs, the refrigerator hummed softly, and one of the floorboards near the kitchen creaked as it always did when a house cooled at night. She was used to those sounds. They had always been part of the background of her life, small reminders that even in stillness, the world moved on. She had just begun to lie back down when it happened. The sound she had not expected, not at this hour. The doorbell rang. It was not loud, but in the silence of the house, it sounded like an alarm. Amani froze. Her first thought was that she had imagined it, but then it rang again. One long, insistent chime. Her pulse quickened. She slipped out of bed and moved to her window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see the porch below. There, in the weak light of the porch lamp, stood Madison Blake. Amani's breath caught in her throat. The popular girl from school, the one who had looked in the eyes and turned her away just hours before, now stood alone in the dark, her shoulders hunched and her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her makeup streaked beneath her eyes. She was crying, not daintily, not like someone trying to salvage grace, but openly, as if something inside her had finally collapsed. Amani hesitated, unsure whether to go downstairs or call her parents. But before she could move, She heard footsteps behind her. Her mother, dressed in a robe, appeared in the hallway with a puzzled expression. The doorbell had woken her. 2. "Who's ringing at this hour?" she asked softly, already heading toward the stairs. Amani followed, heart racing, unsure what to say. When they reached the door, her mother looked to the peephole, then glanced back at her daughter. She said nothing, but her eyes narrowed slightly as if trying to make sense of what she saw. "Do you know this girl?" she asked. Amani nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's Madison." Without further question, her mother opened the door. Madison stood in the doorway, shivering slightly in the cool air. She looked up, eyes red and watery, and met Amani's gaze with a desperate kind of urgency. For a moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched too long. Then finally she spoke. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice hoarse. "Please, just for a minute." Amani's mother looked between the two girls, then stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in, child. You look like you've been through something." Madison stepped inside, hugging her arms tightly. Her heels clicked softly on the wooden floor. She looked smaller now, without the crowd around her, without the energy of the party to prop her up. Amani stood at the foot of the stairs, unsure whether to speak or wait. "I'm sorry," Madison said suddenly, her voice cracking. "I shouldn't be here, but I didn't know where else to go. I had to come." Amani didn't reply immediately. She just watched as Madison broke down in the middle of her living room, no longer trying to hold it together. Her mother exchanged a quick glance with her, then gestured for the girls to sit. "I'll make some tea," she said gently, giving them space. They sat on the couch, a cautious distance between them. The silence lingered for a moment longer, broken only by the occasional sniffle. "I didn't mean to turn you away," Madison finally said, staring at her hands. "I know how that sounds, but it wasn't that I didn't want you there." Amani raised an eyebrow, skeptical but silent. "My parents were involved in the planning. They helped set up, and they were there, watching. And some of the people, they said things about who should be there. I didn't stop them. I just let it happen." Her voice cracked again, and she covered her mouth briefly, trying to contain the tears. "They said it wasn't the right image, that some people wouldn't feel comfortable. I didn't speak up. I just let it happen. And then I saw the way they laughed about it. About you, after you left. I couldn't breathe. I left the party. I couldn't be there anymore." Amani listened, her expression unreadable. Something inside her stirred, a mixture of confusion, anger, and something else she wasn't ready to name. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Madison added. I needed to face you. I needed you to know I see it now. All of it. What I did. What they did. And I'm so sorry." For the first time, Amani saw the girl behind the mask. No curated persona, no social armor. Just a 17-year-old who had made a terrible choice and was now unraveling from the weight of it. Still, she said nothing. Not yet. And so they sat in silence again, the space between them charged with everything that could not yet be said. In the kitchen, the kettle began to whistle. The smell of peppermint tea drifted from the kitchen into the living room, soft and familiar. Amani sat still, her back straight against the couch, her hands folded in her lap. Madison's presence beside her still felt unreal, like a strange echo of the night's confusion refusing to settle. Her mind was moving too fast to focus on any one emotion. Anger flickered beneath the surface, but was tangled with something more complex. Curiosity, disbelief, and the undeniable weight of hearing someone like Madison break, not perform. Her mother returned quietly with 2 mugs, setting them gently on the coffee table before offering a glance to Amani, a silent check-in that only mothers could deliver. Amani gave a small nod, just enough to say she was okay, for now. Her mother disappeared back into the kitchen, giving them privacy without completely retreating. Madison wrapped her hands around the mug, but did not drink. Her hands trembled slightly, either from the cold or from the adrenaline that still clung to her skin. Her eyes were red, but she no longer cried. The moment had passed, and now there was only the hard, unvarnished aftermath of everything she had said. "I know it doesn't fix anything," Madison murmured after a long silence. Coming here, crying in your living room, telling you all this, it probably just makes me look pathetic. Amani's gaze didn't waver. You don't get points for showing up late. Madison looked down, shame washing over her face again. I'm not here for points. I needed to stop pretending. Tonight wasn't about you. It was about them. About the people I keep letting control what I do. Amani tilted her head slightly. And what does that make me? A casualty of your silence. Madison flinched. The words had landed, but she didn't try to deflect them. Yes, she said simply. And I hate that. I hate that I let them make you feel small. Because you're not. You're not small. You're one of the strongest people I know. And I knew it even before tonight. The compliment didn't soften the blow. Not really. But there was something raw in Madison's voice that made it clear she wasn't posturing. She was unraveling, thread by thread. And Amani wasn't used to seeing her like this. No one was. You said they were laughing about me. Amani said quietly. Who? Who was it? Madison looked up sharply, hesitating. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Amani cut in, her tone sharper now. Because I walk through those halls every day. I sit in classrooms with people who smile at me, pretend to be decent. If they think they can do this and go back to pretending nothing happened, they're wrong. Madison hesitated, then spoke carefully, almost reluctantly. It was Taylor, mostly, and Rachel, and a few of the guys from the lacrosse team. They were joking about your dress, about how you tried too hard. Taylor said, she said you looked like you were begging for attention. Amani closed her eyes. The words weren't shocking. Not really. But hearing them out loud gave them weight. They took up space in her chest, pressing against her ribs. I'm sorry, Madison whispered again, voice tight. I didn't stop them. I just stood there and let it happen. I was scared. I didn't want to lose them. But now I can't stop hearing the way you looked at me when I shut that door. I've never hated myself more. Amani looked at her now. Not the girl from the party, not the curated socialite from the feed, but a 17-year-old who had finally run out of people to hide behind. And even then, Amani couldn't find comfort in the apology. Not yet. It was too fresh, too complicated. You don't get to unload all of this and expect me to fix it for you, Amani said, steady. I'm not here to help you sleep better. Madison nodded slowly, tears threatening again but held at bay. I know. I really do. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Madison added, her voice quieter. But I want to make it right, however I can. Amani stared at her, unsure what that even meant. What could make this right? The damage wasn't just about one night. It was about years of being sidelined, overlooked, judged for things she could not control. This moment, this confrontation, was just the most visible crack in a system that had always been designed to leave girls like her outside the door. What are you going to do when they come for you? Amani asked after a while. When they turn on you for standing up to them? Madison hesitated. They already are. I left the party without saying anything. Taylor texted me. She was furious. Rachel blocked me. And I don't know what will happen Monday. But I don't care. I'm done choosing them over what's right. Amani studied her. There was something genuine in her resolve, but time would tell if it was enough. Still, the honesty in her eyes, the way her voice no longer wavered, made it hard to dismiss her entirely. You'll need to prove that, Amani said. Not to me, to yourself. Madison nodded. I will. Amani leaned back against the couch. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but somehow lighter for having heard the truth spoken out loud. She didn't forgive Madison. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something had shifted. The door that had once closed with finality now stood cracked open. Not an invitation, but a possibility. From the kitchen, her mother reappeared quietly, a blanket draped over one arm. She handed it to Madison without a word, then looked to Amani. She's welcome to stay if it's not safe for her to go back, she said softly. Amani looked at Madison, then back at her mother. She can stay on the couch, she said after a beat. Just for tonight. Madison gave a grateful nod, eyes wide with quiet relief. She pulled the blanket over her shoulders and curled into the corner of the couch like someone who had not rested in days. Amani stood slowly, turning toward the stairs. "I'm going to bed," she said, pausing halfway up. "We'll see what happens tomorrow." And with that, she disappeared down the hall, leaving Madison in the dim light of the living room, alone with her thoughts in the silence she had spent too long avoiding. The following Monday began like any other, with the hallways of South Ridge High buzzing with teenage energy and the echoes of lockers slamming shut. Yet, beneath the surface, something in the air felt different. The unspoken tension was thicker, more pointed, as though the entire student body had caught wind of a secret and was now waiting to see what would unfold. Amani Carter walked to the front entrance with her backpack slung over one shoulder and her gaze set forward, deliberate and unflinching. She had debated skipping the day altogether, but something in her gut told her she needed to be seen. Not for validation, but for herself. She would not be invisible. She passed a group of juniors loitering by the vending machines. One of them looked up at her and then whispered something to the others. She felt their eyes follow her, but no one said a word. As she reached her locker, Zoe appeared from the opposite end of the hall, her steps quickening the moment she spotted her friend. "Are you okay?" she asked without greeting, her voice low and full of concern. Amani nodded, unlocking her locker with calm precision. "I'm here, aren't I?" Zoe hesitated, then leaned closer. "People are talking, not just about what happened at the party, about Madison. She posted something." Amani turned sharply. "What?" "She made a whole statement on her Instagram last night. Long post. Called out the people at the party. Admitted what happened, even named a few names. Said she let it happen. Said she was sorry. Said it was bigger than just you and her." Amani stared at her locker, stunned. "And what are people saying?" Zoe's expression darkened. "Some are calling her brave. Others are saying she's just trying to save face. And then there's the rest, Taylor, Rachel, the lacrosse guys, they're pissed. Like, seriously pissed. I heard Rachel tried to report the post for harassment, but it didn't go anywhere." Amani took a breath, slow and steady. "Where is she now?" "Cafeteria. Alone." The word landed heavy. Alone. The same way Amani had felt standing on that porch. She didn't say anything more. She just closed her locker, turned, and headed down the hall with purpose. The cafeteria was unusually quiet for that time of morning. Madison sat near the back, her tray untouched. The moment Amani entered, a few heads turned. Whispers rose and fell like waves. Amani didn't flinch. She walked straight to the table and sat across from Madison without asking. "You really posted it?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Madison nodded, her eyes rimmed with fatigue but clear. "I had to." Amani studied her. "And now they've turned on you." "They think I betrayed them," Madison said, her voice soft. "Maybe I did. Or maybe I just stopped pretending their behavior was okay." Amani leaned back, arms crossed. "And what now? You think they'll just stop?" "I don't know. Probably not. But maybe if I don't look away, someone else won't either. Maybe it starts with me." It was a simple answer, and it didn't promise resolution, but something in it felt honest. Not performative, not curated, but lived. Amani didn't say anything for a moment. Then she leaned forward again, resting her arms on the table. "You said this is bigger than us," she said. "So let's make it bigger. Let's talk about it. Loudly." Madison blinked. "You mean like a forum?" "Like a conversation. A real one. Public. In front of the school. With the administration." Madison hesitated. "You think they'd go for that?" "I think they'll have to. Especially if people keep talking." By lunchtime, the plan had already started to take shape. Amani approached Mr. Callahan, one of the more progressive English teachers, known for his involvement in student initiatives. He listened carefully, asked the right questions, and promised to bring it to the principal by the end of the day. By final period, word had spread further. Amani Carter and Madison Blake were organizing something. No one knew exactly what, but everyone had a theory. The tension boiled over when Taylor confronted Madison outside the gym. "So this is what you do now," she spat, arms folded, voice dripping with venom. "You run to her and trash your own friends?" Madison didn't back down. "If you're more upset about being called out than you are about what you did, that says everything. We didn't do anything wrong. It was just a party." "It was exclusion," Madison said, her voice rising. "It was cruelty, and you laughed while you did it." Taylor scoffed, then turned to Amani, who had stepped in beside Madison, silent until now. "You really think this pity parade is going to change anything? No one even cared about you until this." Amani's eyes narrowed. "And yet here you are, panicking." Taylor rolled her eyes, muttered something under her breath, and stalked off. But the confrontation hadn't gone unnoticed. Students had stopped to watch, to listen, and in the echo of the tension, something had shifted again. No one came to Taylor's defense. That evening, Amani's father sat with her at the dining table, reviewing her outline for the school forum proposal. He read every word carefully, asking questions not to challenge her, but to strengthen her voice. "You're not just asking for an apology," he said finally. "You're asking for accountability." "Yes," Amani replied. "And not just for me." Her father nodded slowly, his eyes filled with pride. "Then you have my full support. Whatever you need." 3 days later, the school announced the formation of an official student panel on inclusion and social responsibility. It would be held in the auditorium and open to all students, faculty, and staff. Amani would speak first. Madison would follow. In the meantime, students began forming their own small discussion groups. Conversations that had once been whispered in corners were now bubbling to the surface. Amani found herself approached by underclassmen, by students of color, by girls who had once felt invisible, each with a story, a wound, a question. And while she didn't always have the answers, she listened. That was how it began. Madison, on her end, kept her promise. She stood by Amani, not in her shadow, not ahead of her, but beside her. She lost followers, received anonymous messages meant to shame her, but she kept going, because she understood now that silence was no longer an option. Something had begun. It was small and fragile and far from finished. But for the first time, South Ridge High felt like a place where change was no longer a distant concept. It had a face. It had a voice. And it had already started to echo. The day of the student forum arrived on a cool spring morning, the kind of day when the air felt alive with possibility. The auditorium at South Ridge High, usually reserved for assemblies and school plays, had been rearranged to face a long table draped in navy fabric. Microphones had been set up. Rows of chairs filled the space, and the murmurs of students gathering grew louder with every passing minute. Teachers lined the edges, some curious, others skeptical, but all aware that something unusual was about to unfold. The principal had agreed reluctantly at first, pressured by the attention Madison's post had generated, but now there was no turning back. The auditorium was packed. Amani sat on stage, her palms resting on her knees, her breathing steady. She wore a simple white blouse and jeans, nothing flashy, but she radiated presence in a way she never had before. Zoe sat in the front row, offering silent encouragement with every glance. Madison sat 2 seats away at the table, flipping through her note cards nervously, though she had rehearsed her speech more than a dozen times. They were not friends in the traditional sense, but they had become something else, partners in a moment larger than themselves. When the principal introduced the event, his voice carried the weight of formality, but even he seemed aware that this gathering would not be contained by the usual platitudes. He gestured toward Amani. "Our first speaker will be Amani Carter, who asked to begin this conversation." Amani stood, the microphone catching the soft inhale she took before speaking. Her voice, calm but firm, filled the auditorium. "I wasn't planning to stand here. A week ago, I didn't imagine myself speaking to all of you. But sometimes life decides for you. Sometimes silence becomes impossible." She paused, letting the quiet settle. Every face seemed fixed on her. I was told, without words, that I didn't belong at a party. That moment wasn't about music or decorations, or who was invited. It was about something bigger, a message that some people are allowed to belong without question, while others are reminded of their place. Maybe some of you think it's small, just one night, just a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. It was a reflection of something that happens every day, in subtle ways that are easy to ignore if they don't happen to you. Her voice gained strength as she went on. When we laugh along with exclusion, when we don't speak up, when we decide it's easier to stay comfortable, we are part of the problem. We build walls around each other, then pretend they aren't there. That has to stop, and it can stop here with us. There was a silence when she finished, heavy but electric, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Then came the first wave of applause. Not polite, not hesitant, but genuine, spreading quickly until it filled the space. Amani stepped back, her chest rising and falling, a flicker of pride sparking inside her. Madison was next. She stood with less certainty, but her voice carried honesty. I need to say something that isn't easy. I hurt someone I should have protected. I closed the door on her because I was afraid of what other people would think. And in that moment, I became part of something ugly. I can't undo it, but I can own it. I can face it. And I can choose to be different from now on. She glanced toward Amani, then back at the crowd. I know some of you hate me right now. I've lost friends. I've been called names. But if I lose people because I decided to stop being cruel, then maybe they weren't friends at all. What matters is what we do next, not for me, but for every person who has felt like Amani that night, because she isn't alone. We all know that. The auditorium remained still for a moment longer, and then, unexpectedly, a junior named Marisol stood up from the back row. She's right, Marisol said, her voice carrying. It's not just her. I felt it too. Different ways, different moments. We shouldn't have to keep pretending it doesn't happen. Others began murmuring. Some nodding, some whispering to each other. A teacher in the front row scribbled notes. The silence that had once been heavy now shifted into something else, momentum. By the end of the forum, students had shared stories of exclusion, subtle jokes that cut deeper than anyone realized, moments where they felt invisible in classrooms or teams or clubs. Teachers listened, some visibly uncomfortable, others deeply moved. The administration promised follow-up meetings, workshops, and an ongoing panel led by students. It was not a solution, not yet, but it was a beginning. A door had opened, and this time, no one was closing it. Weeks passed, and the ripples spread. New groups formed, small circles of students who met during lunch to discuss diversity, empathy, and inclusion. The principal, initially cautious, approved a student-led advisory board to propose changes in school policies and training. What began as one painful night was evolving into a shift in the culture of South Ridge High. For Amani, life did not suddenly become easy. There were still whispers, still people who rolled their eyes or dismissed conversations as unnecessary. But now she was no longer alone in carrying that weight. She had found her voice, and it carried further than she ever expected. She was nominated for a leadership award by her teachers, recognized not only for her courage, but for the way she inspired others to speak. The award ceremony took place in the same auditorium where the forum had been held. As she stood on stage, receiving plaque, she scanned the audience. Rows of faces looked back at her, students of every background, some clapping politely, others cheering with genuine pride. And there, near the center, was Madison, watching her with a quiet smile. It was not a smile of triumph or absolution. It was a smile of recognition, of respect, of solidarity. Amani held the plaque in her hands, the weight of it grounding her. The memory of that night at the party still lingered, sharp and unresolved. But it no longer defined her. What defined her now was this: the courage to turn silence into speech, pain into purpose. She understood that the work was far from over, that change was never swift or simple. Yet, for the first time, she felt certain that her voice could carry, and that others would carry it with her. And as the applause swelled, she realized that belonging had never been about an invitation. It had always been about creating a space no one could close her out of again.